Every country in the world is in debt. The US now borrows more than $38 trillion, the highest figure of its history. About $14 trillion in the European Union, Japan almost $9 trillion, even Saudi Arabia like oil-rich nations or Germany and China like the largest amount of export forces. But here is paradox. Who if everyone borrows money, exactly who you owe? This is the place where the financial data, money, power and history multiply. And nothing is as simple as it looks. Debt is the architecture of the modern world, not only a load. Every battle, every crisis, each boom and bust sit on the top of the invisible strainers of IOUs. And if you follow the chain of the receivables enough, you will not discover anything. The world is not particularly debtor to everyone. He owes him. However, this doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we reach this point, a planet that is drowned in more than $15 trillion, about 3 times the global economy. We need to return back in the beginning. Before the first credit card swipe or digital transfer, the idea of national debt was born in Wall Street, not in battle. In 1694 he fought with England, France and appeared from gold. King returned to traders for a permanent interest payment supported by future taxes. They funded Crown. To manage this new arrangement, the UK Bank was installed. It was revolutionary. The state could now spend money not yet. And in return, lenders received something without price, a promise from the government can be traded or sold. This is the birth of the government bond, the seeds of the modern financial system. France copied it. The Netherlands refined him. The new independent United States accepted him to finance their revolutions and then expand its west. National debt was not a sign of failure, but a measure of reliability. The ability to borrow was the ability to rule. Empires once conquered the region to remove gold. Now they published tabels to attract interest. The battlefield became the ballet. 3-century advanced in debt became dominant export in the world. The United States borrowed $38 trillion. Japan increases the increase in $9 trillion per 100 days and increases global debting. Every country is borrowed. Each bank gets borrowed. Taxes, savings and retirements are both borrowers and creditors. But who keeps the other end of the IP exactly? Let's start with the United States because Borku is not only national, but global. This $38 trillion is open to public about half of the store, meaning investors owe to other government parts. About 3 of these investors are American. Banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve itself. One of the remaining 3 is about 9 trillion people in foreign hands. Japan is the top owner of about $1 trillion, followed by approximately $800 billion by China. Then England, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say that the US is Borku to China, this is true. But only for about 2% of the total. Most of America owe to America. The Treasury connects problems, banks and funds purchase them. The Federal Reserve often takes them back, creates new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes that fund interest in this tabulaire, then they enter American pension accounts. This is a circular mirror. Debt is real, but it is a reflection of credit or mostly the same system. And this circularity is not only American, global. Japan lends US through treasuries. The US borrows Europe through IMF. Europe gives borrowers to developed nations through the World Bank. The emerging countries return to advanced economies by foreign exchange reserves and Western bonds. A planetary game of hot potatoes, outside the potato promises. Each country holds IOU. Every word was secured with another word. Like a poker table where each player borrows next chips. And the only rule that keeps the game alive is that nobody can stand up. But there is a 4th layer. The most powerful one of all, the markets themselves. Behind each government bond sits on a web of institutions. Hedge funds, retirement funds, dominant wealth funds and central banks manage on trillions in assets. They are real arbiters of credit. They decide which nations can borrow cheaply and pay a premium to survive. When he loses trust, the currencies crashed, the governments drop and all economies can be reconfigured overnight. Democracy decides to manage who, the markets decide who survive. And the final market manufacturer is a modern high parrot, central bank of this system. Central banks not only manage debt, they produce. When the Federal Reserve or European Central Bank purchase government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. The responsibility of a balance sheet becomes the presence of something else. Represents a debt in any other place in circulation. There is nothing like debt money. Every money convinced every bill on the surface of a iota of each digital dollar. For decades, this cycle continued by self-confidence. As long as investors believe that governments will pay interest, they will never turn on the machine, even if not the principal. But what happens when the wave of trust? We've seen before. In 2010, the government has become unpaid in Greece. Bondholder panic Ned, multiply. European Central Bank and IMF interfered. But their recovery came with austerity. Tax walks, interruptions, and public unemployment. For a whole generation, the recovery was another word for termination. In Argentina, the repetitive defaults become a national lanet. In Sri Lanka, the fuel shortage and political collapse followed when the government escapes from foreign money to service loans. When the system is broken, the receivables become suddenly visible. IMF, ratings agencies, anonymous shareholders that hold all nations of throat. And again, even after crash, the same logic starts again. New loans change old. Old debts are reconfigured. The machine is reset with a new name on the same balance sheet. This was not intended for repayment of debt in the 21st century. This is designed to be repeated. Governments are not planning to pay their debts today. Not now, not at all. This is not conspiracy. This policy. When receiving a loan, we are expected to refund the principal. But governments work differently. They treat debts like a rounded subscription, they post new links to pay old, economists say refinancing. Interest becomes a real product. The rent was charged for stability. The global economy now depends on this rent, like a shark, should continue swimming. Today global financial system works on trust, does not pay back. The United States will never explain $38 trillion. He will refund him forever. Japan has expanded its debts for decades, now GDP exceeds 250%. And again the government is near the bonded zero. Investors do not expect to pay back. They are waiting to renew the agreement. Why? Because the government debt for them is the most secure arm that exists. A US Treasury does not appear as a responsibility. This is an asset, the basis of global markets. Pension funds keep it. Banks use it as security. Central banks see it as money. The system depends on the payment of the governments never. Because if they did, the world will lose the most reliable financial instrument. Imagine Washington's debt decides to pay every passing dollar. Banks and funds in the world will suddenly lose their most stable assets. Dollar supply will gradually shrink, deflation and collapse. Payment from debt will destroy a lot of things that make the economy function. So governments do the opposite. They do more. Not surprising, but as rhythmic. Debt becomes a kind of heartbeat for capitalism, every retirement in the world through mortgage and market. And so when politicians talk about balancing the budget or paying the national debt, they sell an illusion. The goal is not to eliminate debt. To keep it sustainable, serviceable, and desire until the system never believed to it. Because once the belief disappears, numbers are important. Trust crashes, interest rates increased, and the economy was built entirely on train promises, pauses. This is the true secret of the dominant debt. Plan never paid back. The plan is to keep the world believe that it will be. This is a closed trust cycle. And as long as it has this confidence, numbers can be expanded as you're timeless. However, trust is not completely distributed. When we owe this ourselves, this is just half right. Interest payments are not equal to society. They land from taxpayers and workers to institutions and investors who hold debt. In other words, debt is not only a transfer between countries, a transfer between classes. So global inequalities and global indebtedness are rising together. The system punishes those who have their own debt and pay only. If this comes familiar, the same story scaled. From homes to nations, from countries to planet, the owners are not a villa, the debtors are not sacrificed. There are two sides of the same motor. The problem is that what happens when the engine is out of fuel? Does the new borrower move faster with the promises made before? Who gives credit? Leave abstract and starts to be personal. Because on the top of this global pyramid, there is no 100 to blame. Not China. Not Wall Street. Not IMF. All in we. The modern financial system turned itself into money. Governments ask it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and citizens depend on it. The line between borrower and creditor is blurred beyond recognition. Debt once meant tavel. Today, it means balance. But if this balance always gives tips, if the confidence is broken, the illusion ends, and we will remember what the boron is actually. A word that cannot be held forever. If you have given you a new perspective, subscribe. Golden Ledger channel has historical answers. I will show you where to look.